I would start now. Thanks for joining all the way in the back to my COSIC seminar on a paper that we will be presenting at PETS 22 in a couple of weeks. So this was already published in the first issue of 2022, but the conference will take place in 3 weeks. Our paper is titled From Onion Not Found to Guard Discovery, and it's work done by me, Ganesh, and Claudia together. So as the title might give away to a couple of you already, this attack works in the context of Tor or in the Tor ecosystem, particularly with one of the primary applications of Tor browser. So let's spend just a few minutes to get everyone up to speed on how this exactly works. So Tor is the largest anonymity service and network that we have deployed and available for use to protect our privacy online. And depending on how you count users in such a privacy service, which is always a bit tricky, you end up with estimates of between 2 to 8 million daily users on the Tor network. Tor is a general purpose network, so you can theoretically tunnel lots of different types of application through Tor. However, Tor has a primary use case, so in almost in most cases, Tor will be used together with Tor browser. So users will download Tor browser, which is a modified Firefox, to access websites and access the internet, access web pages privately through Tor. So there's a combination, right? So you download the application Tor browser, modified Firefox, providing anti-tracking, anti-fingerprinting, application level defenses, and then your traffic will be tunneled through the Tor network, which is exactly this process of pushing traffic through a number of hops to then reach your destination at the other end. So the first thing that you can do with this is you can access public internet web pages, let's say google.com or similar addresses, similar destinations, right? And in those cases, you as the user, you as the Tor browser user will pick a sequence of relays, and the sequence of relays is called a circuit. Okay, so you build a circuit through the Tor network by picking this set of Tor relays, and then you will tunnel your TCP streams through this chain of Tor relays, this circuit, to your ultimate destination. So this can be then the DNS server or the web server that you intend to visit. This public web circuits, they feature, in the default case, they feature 3 hops. The first of them is the guard. So users pick a guard, and this is a special or exposed position of the circuit because users will pick this guard for a longer amount of time, right? So there's a number of relays in the Tor network, and users will pick from a subset of those, one or a couple of them as their guards, and keep this for a longer amount of time, a longer period of time. And this is because, especially, particularly this position in the circuit is exposed because the guard is the one relay that knows the IP address of the user, right? So there's some kind of protection built into Tor that takes care of reducing impacts of where this first hop is adversarial, precisely by using this guard concept. Okay, so picking relays for a long amount of time and reusing them. The middle relay, in this case the R letter, users pick weighted but randomly from the set of all relays, and then the exit is the one that actually unpacks the Tor connection and sends it out to the public internet. Okay, so this is a typical circuit. However, there's also another part of the internet that you can visit with Tor browser, and this is I'll call it here the Tor web. So any destination that, for example, ends in a .onion address. Previously, this was often called the dark web, right? But let's call it the Tor web. So any kind of destination that ends in onion, you can also visit with Tor browser, and they are a bit special because in the public web case of visiting the web using Tor, the user enjoys privacy protections, right? But in the Tor web case, also the server side enjoys privacy protections. Okay, so you basically have a similar process for connecting to your destination, but also from the server side connecting towards the user. Okay. This, of course, is somewhat more of an involved process. It's a bit more work than just connecting to the public web. So there's multiple steps that have to be taken before you can ultimately connect to an onion service. But we will not focus on them, only on the very first step, which is looking up a descriptor that lets you, as the Tor browser user, know how to connect to this onion service. Okay, there's more information needed for you to build such a circuit. And you will find this information in something that is called the hidden service descriptor, HS-desk. Okay? And the relays in the Tor network that maintain these hidden service descriptors and will respond to you with such a descriptor, they're called hidden service directories or HSDs. You can think of this step as like DNS but for onion services, okay? Because you will need to find out how to connect there. Crucially for our attack, there's a specific number of HSDs that maintains any one hidden service descriptor. So in the version of Tor that we are analyzing in the paper, this was a set of 6 HSDs that was by a process chosen from among all HSDs to serve one onion service addresses descriptor. Okay, so there's some kind of replication mechanism built in such that if one of them is down, you can still find another one that will give you the response. So remember these 6 here. And then crucially also, each of those hidden service descriptor lookups will happen over a fresh 4-hop circuit. So a Tor circuit that contains 4 Tor hops, and each of those lookups has to take a fresh one. Okay? Because this is relevant for our attack, let's quickly look at how this lookup process works in the special case that the onion service address for which you want to look up the descriptor does not exist. Okay? You give someone an onion service address, you trigger the Tor browser to go look up the descriptor, but this address is actually not in fact a running onion service, okay? So I want to walk you through the steps that ultimately will lead up in abandoning this request. So you can see here on the top left that this is the user symbolized by the Tor browser. And in this case, we're assuming that this generated address is attack.onion, which of course is not a valid address, but for the sake of this presentation here, right? So it will build this 4-hop circuit, the final hop being the hidden service directory. In this case, let's say it's the first one out of those 6 that was selected. Of course, the guard is fixed, right? Because this is how the guard concept works. And the ones in between are sampled similarly to how middle relays are sampled for public web circuits. So the Tor browser reaches out to the hidden service directory, requests the descriptor for this address, but of course it doesn't exist. So according to protocol, the hidden service directory will respond with a classical, typical HTTP response code 44 not found. Okay? So if that is the case, and the Tor browser, or the user in this case, receives this response, it will go ahead and pick a second one out of those 6 responsible and repeat the process, right? Of course, the response will be the same for not found. And you can imagine how this goes on. So you will exhaust the list of hidden service directory responsible for the address that you want to look up with your requests, right? You will contact them all. Crucially, the guard is fixed on those, but the middle relays, they will change based on which ones you select, right? And at the end, the lookup will be abandoned. So this process is relevant for us. You can see here all 6 hidden service directories were contacted, fresh 4-hop circuits where the guard position is fixed. So considering what kind of adversary can launch our attack, you can see a very simplified representation of the Tor network in the figure up top. On the left-hand side, you see the Tor users. Again, we focus on Tor browser, right? There's more versions for ways for how you can tunnel your traffic through Tor, but in this case, we assume Tor browser. And you see the various relay positions here in the Tor network. So guards, of course, they build the bridge to the clients. Exits, they build the bridge to the destinations. And then in between are regular relays and these hidden service directories. And of course, you reach out to destinations. So this can be first-party destinations, such as, let's say, Google servers for google.com. But also, if you think about, for example, visiting a newspaper, and this newspaper embeds advertisements or something like this, then there will be a number of third parties involved in compiling your request, right? So responding to your request. And they can be statically in the page, or they can also be dynamically reached out to, and these kind of things, right? There's elaborate processes for how third parties become part of a web page. The adversary that we consider is quite a feasible one, so to speak, right? So we assume the adversary, which is depicted in red dashed borders on this in the upper figure, runs relays that serve a certain amount of Tor's relay bandwidth. Okay, so we assume for our purposes 1, 2, or 5% of Tor's relay bandwidth are under the control of the adversary. This is not very expensive to provide, so this is definitely feasible. The adversary also runs a few of these special directories responding to descriptor lookups, so HSDs. In our case, we assume 10 or if you want to speed up certain aspects, you can even go to 20. It's also not very expensive to run those. And then the adversary needs to be somehow part of the target web page that will actually launch the attack. Okay, and this can be by the adversary running the first party, like being the first party, or by somehow being involved as one of the third parties that has capabilities to be injected in the site, right? So let's say, in this case, I marked a third party like an advertiser, a random advertiser on a web page as the adversary, right? There's various ways for how the adversary can become part of this, but this is one. And then what we exploit for our attack is that the behavior, as I already explained, how onion circuits are created by web pages is unregulated in Tor browser, and that the lookup that is the result of an unsuccessful request for a descriptor, that this is a distinctive. So the adversary can use this lookup as a signal that one of their attack lookups is in process. Okay, and then we also evaluate a set of countermeasures that can help mitigate our attack. Okay, so let's walk over how our attack works. So in the beginning, the client using Tor browser here will reach out in step 1, will reach out to the malicious website, to the target web page. This will go through the regular 3-hop circuit to public web addresses, and the responding site somehow involves the adversary. In this case, it's as part of a third party, and the adversary decides to launch the attack against this client. We assume that, for the majority of our experiments, we assume that the adversary has scripting capabilities on the web page. So the adversary is allowed to embed JavaScript, and this JavaScript will be executed as part of the building the web page. But we also have a scriptless version that also achieves quite decent success. So we don't have to rely on JavaScript, but for most of our experience, we assume we do. The embedded malicious code, the malicious JavaScript, will of course be sent back to the client, and the Tor browser, then parsing all the parts of the web page, trying to build the DOM, will start executing it. And as part of this script, this malicious script will start injecting non-existing onion service addresses into the DOM of the web page. Okay, and there is some benefit to pace this process, and through long experiments, we found out that the best rate is to inject 3 of those non-existing onion service addresses per second. This will lead in the highest amount of requests over a certain amount of time. This process I already described, right? So the victim will start building these fresh 4-hop circuits, reaching out to the hidden service directories that allegedly host this hidden service descriptor needed to connect to this address. The adversary running regular relays in the Tor network and running hidden service directories eventually will be in the position where the adversary controls the second hop, so the hop right after the guard, and the HSDR responding to this request. Okay, and this is exactly the case that we, as the adversary, want to achieve. Right, the relays take care of logging cell patterns that they see fly by, that they can later on identify the guard, and the hidden service directory, the adversarial hidden service directories, they will also keep track of metadata about all the requests that they see. But only logging them. They will respond perfectly fine according to protocol. They will respond with a 404 not found, and not mess with the response anyhow. And then if the hidden service directory sees a target address being requested, right, like the adversary knows which addresses she embeds on the web page, and if one of those pops up at the hidden service directory site, the hidden service directory will reach out to all of her middle relays and basically compare nodes, right? Like put together the 2 tables of metadata about these requests. So of course, only target addresses will be considered, and on the relay side, so in this case it's R5 as an example, right? Only cell patterns that match this distinctive 404 not found cell pattern, only those will be considered. All others will immediately be discarded. And there's a couple more checks, such as that the third hop, so the one in between the relay and the HSD, of course, needs to be the same, and the access time needs to fit, right? So there's a couple more filters, basically. And then if all of those basically match, then we consider the guard, that is the preceding hop of the second hop relay under adversarial control, to be a candidate for the victim that this attack was launched against. And we show that the identification of this guard is quite quick in simulations later on. You may be wondering, though, users mistype addresses, onion services go down, but users will still request them. So there will probably be like unrelated for not found responses going on the Tor network. Of course, this would like seriously impact our attack because the adversary might mistake one of those for one of their attack requests. So we kind of have to get a feel for the false positive rate in the network. And indeed, there is cases where this can happen. We show two of them in the figure up top, where like one of these unrelated background for not found lookups may lead the adversary to mistake this for an attack lookup. We call those noise lookups, right? And we investigated this for over 31 days on a relay that we run here at COSIC, which has the HSDF flag, so it is a hidden source directory. And we tracked the responses that may result in false positives. And indeed, the rate is quite high. So over 90% of the responses that our hidden source directory gave to requests it saw were actually the ones that we want to use, right? So there's quite some traffic in the background. Indeed, like we extrapolate from our single relay. This is, of course, a very strong extrapolation, right? We extrapolate that there's 1,052.27 noise lookups per second going on in the Tor network. So definitely something that we have to factor in. And we do that in our simulations that are supposed to show the time it takes the adversary to discover a guard of the victim, right? The victim visiting the target web page. And we want to see how long does it take until the adversary learns the guard. We account for various adversarial capabilities, right? So again, the bandwidth share varies between 1, 2, and 5%. And then also, how many of those 6 HSDers that are responsible for each of the address does the adversary control, right? So there's a pre-computation step that the adversary can take and should take because it's very feasible to increase the number of HSDs that they control for any of the attack addresses. So we will consider 1 out of 6, which is the very basic, like bare minimum basically, right? Otherwise the adversary wouldn't see any of those. But we also include like 2 over 6, or 1 over 3, which means 2 out of the 6 HSDs are run by the adversary, and you can potentially also go higher, right? We include also 1 here on the right-hand side as the last value, but this is only for legacy reasons because you could only achieve the case where you controlled all 6 of them in the outdated V2 Onion version, Onion service version. So V2 Onion services are deprecated. They, I think, by now are very much end of life. So V3 is a big improvement over them. And for those, we consider the 1 over 3 setting to be the most realistic and also feasible for the adversary. And then, of course, the noise lookups, as I mentioned, we have to factor in that they may create false positives. So we use the rate 1,052 per second in our simulations. We conducted live Tor network experiments to determine various characteristics of our attack, such as the best rate, right? And from those, we have the profiles that actually did the lookup on the client side. And we use them to base our requests in the simulations on them, such that they have like a real world basis, right? They form the basis for our requests there. So we can reuse the 2,867 profiles. And now the crucial part here is that we want to see the case where the adversary identifies a guard for a particular victim twice. Not just once, but twice, because this really helps driving down the false positive rate. So any of the background noise lookups, they may, of course, trigger identification of a guard that is actually a false positive. And to combat that, we wait until we see a specific guard twice. And at that point, this identification may be a true positive, may be correct, or may be wrong, and it's still a false positive, right? So looking at what we get with these simulations in our results, this is the main cumulative distribution plot. You can see here the 9 subplots, and the adversarial capabilities or strength increases from the top left to the bottom right. You see here in the columns from left to right increasing share of the HSDers responsible for the attack addresses, and in the rows increasing bandwidth share, relay bandwidth share, right? And so as I alluded to before, the most realistic adversary that we, or like the strongest but realistic adversary that we consider here is the one in the middle column in the bottom row. So H over 1/3, H over 1/3, and 5% relay bandwidth share, right? Because that is attainable. And as you can see, for this adversary, 50% of the victims, their guard was discovered after only 12.06 seconds on the web page, and 99% of the victims, their guard was learned after 48.56 seconds. So this is this is quick, right? Quite a number of simulations went into these results, so it's 2.5 million simulations that we base this on. I mentioned a couple of times that increasing this share of hidden source directories responsible is a useful step the adversary should take, right? Because it decreases attack time. You may be wondering, okay, like how feasible is this? Is this something that restricts the attack to adversaries with like large machines or something like this? And we evaluated this process with considering for an adversary to run between 10 and 25 HS tiers in the network, which is quite like this is not expensive, right? And you see that, even for the adversary that only runs 10 HS tiers, on average, pre-computing a set of hidden service addresses of size 180 takes on average like 10.3 minutes. And 900, which allows you to run the attack for 5 minutes on a particular victim, only takes 52.3 minutes on average. Given that any of the parameters that go into this pre-computation, you have at least 12 hours before a client will use them, there is really no restriction on this pre-computation for any of the adversaries to do this daily, right? Like these values that concern, like that cause HS tiers to have a different set of onion service addresses that they're responsible for. This happens daily, and there's at least 12 hours between those changing and clients using them. So given that even in the let's say weakest adversary setting here, it takes on average below 1 hour, the adversary will always do this, right? So there's no constraint here. Okay, so this is our attack and its strength, basically. Let's talk about how this can be mitigated. And our goal is, of course, to address the fundamental problem instead of like just the specific incarnation of this attack. So there's two approaches that we can take on client side to limit fallout from this attack. The first one being capping the attempts, right? Like you can limit the number of lookups that any client can do, and if you reach this limit, no further ones will be possible. Given that our attack relies on creating many of them, there will be a limit to this, right? So this is the capping attempts countermeasure. And then a concept that Tor already has deployed is the reusing choices approach, where instead of picking from all relays that you potentially could select for specific circuit positions, you restrict this set to a small subset. This is exactly the guard concept, right? So by introducing the guard concept for the first hop positions on circuits, Tor is reusing prior made choices for a specific amount of time, and thus limiting exposure to picking a malicious hop as this particular position. This maps to the two countermeasures that I will discuss here. There's one more in the paper, but it's not the most effective, right? So we propose that there could be a token bucket attached to each Tor browser tab that regulates exactly this lookup behavior. So the Tor browser tab would have to take one token to build a circuit, and thus capping attempts. And the second one is actually a proposal from the Tor developers called Vanguard's Lite. And Vanguard's Lite is the light version of Vanguard's, which will restrict the number of the number of relays that are eligible for the second hop position on onion circuits, only on onion circuits. So this would reuse choices similar to the guard concept. And then in this, if this proposal is used, and indeed they implemented it in the Tor 0.4.7 version, then this limits exposure of our attack to only users who have picked at least one adversarial hop in the second hop per set, right? So all users that don't have any adversarial relay in there, they're fine, they're good, similar to how the guards work, right? But users who still pick one adversarial relay in this set are still vulnerable to our attack. So evaluating the token bucket, again, this is a commutative distribution plot. The columns are, again, the hidden source directory share of the adversary, and the rows are now initial values for this token bucket. So we vary this between 5, 10, and 15 tokens that the Tor browser tab can use to build a circuit. And then also some kind of replenishment process by with a refill rate, so adding more tokens over time. The blue line is 1 per minute, the red line is 6 per minute. And as you can see, the red ones, so the higher refill rate, they still lead to quite high compromise rates after 5 minutes of attack time, beyond 10%, so we disregard them for being useful. But with a refill rate of only 1 per minute, we end up at 1%, or roughly 1%, roughly 2%, roughly 4% compromise probability after 5 minutes of attack time. Remember that here we reached pretty much close to 100% in all of the cases, right? So this is quite a strong reduction. And then looking at Vanguard's light, this is the commutative distribution plot in case the users have selected at least one adversarial relay in their second hop set. So this is on average applies to 18.5% of all Tor users in the 5% relay bandwidth share adversarial setting. So the more relay bandwidth share, the likelier to be in this position, of course. And yeah, that's kind of clear, right? Like if you select an adversarial relay in this very small set, then the time to discover your guard is very quick because there's only 4 choices. So we see here that for the 99th percentile of the victims is reached after just 21.31 seconds. So in case you have an adversarial relay, our attack is very quick against you. But again, the 81.5% on average of Tor users that don't have such a relay, they are fine. So let me conclude. In our paper, we have presented a new fast, stealthy, and low-cost web-based guard discovery attack. Fast, as I've shown in the simulations. Stealthy because it does not rely on running exposed positions such as guards or exits or any of these things, just regular relays and HS steers. And low cost because you need only like a low number in the thousands of euros per month to run this attack, just from the Tor infrastructure side. It exploits 2 facts. The fact that onion circuit creation on web pages is unregulated in Tor browser, and that the lookup pattern of an unsuccessful lookup is distinctive enough for the adversary to rely on it, to use this as the signal for identifying the guard. We have done extensive live Tor network experiments and simulations, and the key result here is that against a reasonable adversary, 5% relay bandwidth share, 1/3 of the HS is controlled, we compromise users quite quickly, 50 percentile after 12.06 seconds, 99th percentile after 48.56 seconds. Countermeasures that we considered in this presentation, we see that the token bucket is quite effective, so it reduces from 99% compromise probability to about 4% after 300 seconds. And Vanguard's light is limited in effectiveness against our attack, but Vanguard's light is also a much more general approach, so it changes different aspects that apply to more situations that a Tor browser might encounter. So there's benefits to going with the general route, but against our particular attack, its effectiveness is limited. And any of the code and the data that went into the paper in this presentation is public, and you can check it out at this link. A couple of references that are used throughout the presentation. And that's it. Thank you. I'm open for questions.